First, a little news. Catholic churches and religious statues across the U.S. were targets of vandalism and potential arson in the past week. This as pressure mounts to remove historical statues and monuments that some find offensive. A statue of Our Lady was lit aflame at St. Peter's Catholic Church in Boston. A man in Ocala, Florida, was arrested after crashing his vehicle into Queen of Peace Catholic Church, then lighting it afire with parishioners inside. He called his actions awesome and said he was on a mission. And in California, a fire destroyed most of the 250-year-old church at Mission San Gabriel. The mission was founded in 1771 by Saint Junipero Serra. The cause of the blaze is currently unknown, but arson has not been ruled out. And in 1988, my first guest led the Notre Dame Fighting Irish to a national championship. He's still a member of the College Football Hall of Fame. Tonight, he's here to discuss the upcoming NCAA football season jeopardized by this pandemic and what can be done to keep students and athletes safe. Please welcome back to the program, Lou Holtz. Coach, thank you for being here. Last week, the Ivy League ruled out playing all sports this fall due to this coronavirus. And this week, the Patriot League followed suit. The Big Ten and Pac-12 have canceled non-conference games. Your reaction to these decisions?
I think there are going to be more conferences going to cancel the entire season because you have very many liberal people on a college atmosphere that say that one COVID is too many. Unfortunately, the young people in this country believe that COVID-19 is like cancer. It's a death knell, whereas less than 30 people have died under the age of 23, whereas 2 years ago, over 150 died from the flu and the virus. As long as you're going to say, well, we can't do it unless it's absolutely safe, and the rules and regulations they have in college right now, there's no way in this world they can start a football season, let alone finish it. But you have to look at both effects. Now they're going to look at the financial effect. The average Power 5 team receives $60 million a year from conferences for football. You take that out of the budget, then you can't have an athletic program. There's no women's sports. There's no non-revenue sports along that line. It's insane the direction we're going. My feeling is, you come play. If you're sick, go see a doctor. If you ain't, come to practice. It's not complicated. Yeah. But we want to shut down the entire country over this epidemic. Yeah, we want to keep older people safe like me, but we have gone to extreme. Sometimes the remedy is much worse than the illness, and that's the case here.
On Tuesday, Vice President Mike Pence and U.S. Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos were at LSU here in Louisiana discussing the importance of reopening schools. I want to play you what DeVos had to say. Listen.
America's public health experts and every doctor on this task force agree we're better off opening America's schools and getting kids back to school. Our schools can do what it takes to keep everyone safe from the virus.
Now, Coach, you coached college football for over 40 years. How important is it for college-age students to be in school as well as part of a team and involved in athletics, psychologically, culturally, mentally?
I think it's important for all the different reasons, not just college. Well, let's go back to grade school. Let's go back to high school. When you close people down, and particularly in a poor area, which doesn't have real good schools, and say we're going to do it all by remote learning, that's absurd. You have to be able to learn to relate to other people, to get along. You're depriving them of some of the happiest days of their life. My granddaughter's a senior in high school, graduated summa cum laude, could not even have graduation the last 3 months. She couldn't be with her friends to celebrate, to say goodbyes and go off to college. There are so many different reasons why going to school is so important, and particularly if you look at the fact that the death rate of young people is very minimal, if any. Yeah. So let's get them back to school. Let's learn. Let's teach. If we don't do that again, this country is going to really suffer. But then again, there's some people that don't want that. Why? Because they want to disrupt everything in this country, whether it's tear down statues, ransack buildings, etc., until the election's over. I believe after the election, if President Trump's not elected, or if he is elected, I think it will all end either way.
Wow. LSU's head coach, football coach, Ed Orgeron, Coach O, had this to say about his football team. Listen.
You know, we have our team back. They're ready to go. We need football. We need to play. The state needs it. This country needs it.
He said that the state and the country needs football. Do you agree?
Absolutely, I agree. We need sports. We need athletics. We need entertainment. We need to get back to our way of life. Back in 1959, when I just getting out of college, and the swine flu, that he didn't close the country down unless 150,000 people lost their life. But you moved on. This is all part of life. There's a risk. This is the home of the free and the brave. Well, I'm not sure how free we are. We sure are very brave because everybody cowers up. And you got to wear a mask. You got to do this. You got to do that. Yeah, I think you ought to be tested on it. But by the same token, let's move on with our life. There's a risk in everything you do. You look at how many people have committed suicide. In 1 month, we had more people commit suicide than we did all last year. You can't pin people up. You can't make them alone by themselves. A fear of everything in this world, anything you touch. I'm tired of it. I'm an old man. Here's what I say. Please don't keep me alive by preventing me from living. Let me live my life. I don't want my tombstone to read, here lies Lou Holtz, born January 6, 1937, died July 24th, 2020, buried August 19th, 2024. Let me live till the day I die.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you raised a very important point, Coach, about the viral load. And nobody's reporting this. Next week, we might have a doctor on to talk about this. The viral load of this virus in young people is very low. So their ability to pass it on to others, particularly if they're asymptomatic, is practically nil. All the studies, the German study, the Iceland study shows this. And we frankly are not talking about that enough. We focus on people who have the disease, but the mortality rate and the infectability among the young is practically nil. So I do think we have to put that into the equation here as we're deciding whether to open or close schools and the detrimental effects that you raised, suicides, drug use, all of that from the isolation. Now, if you were coaching today, what kind of precautions would you take to keep your players safe? Oakley's come up with this new football face mask. It sort of has a shield on it for the NFL players to wear. Good idea?
It may or may not be. I don't think it's really going to have much of an effect on it. But to me, I would say if you have a asthma problem, then I don't want you to play. Other than asthma, et cetera, let's play, let's do it. If you don't feel good, I used to tell the players that in the start of practice, I never had problem with heat. Yet every year we have a player or two die with heat. There's a risk. I'd say, you're in charge of your health. You don't feel good, you go see the trainer. You don't need my permission. You get all the water you want, but you're in charge of it. If you pass out, you're going to impress me with your courage. You're going to show me what a stupid idiot you are. And I don't have time to visit in the hospital. And furthermore, it behooves you to know that I only do mouth-to-mouth resuscitation on girls over 21, under 30, and you don't qualify, so you're on your own. I never had a heat problem. Just same thing with athletes. You're in charge of your health, but we're going to go on because we cannot shut this entire country down any longer. That's my feeling. And I really don't trust the media. And trust is absolutely critical. For example, in the state of Florida, they talk about how many cases we had. Isn't it interesting that the media emphasized number of cases in Texas, in Florida, and Arizona, 3 key states that President Trump has to win. But here in Florida, we have 5 different locations that every test they've given has turned out to be positive. That is impossible. I've been tested. I'm negative on it. But I just don't trust all the statistics and everything. One time they tell us, masks don't help. Next time you got to wear a mask or you're going to be put in prison for a year. Good Lord knows. Just let me live my life. Let me take the risk myself.
Yeah, well, and the counting of these COVID cases is also, we've seen states, Texas and other states, Florida as well, readjust the numbers of infections because they either miscounted them or overcounted them. So there's a lot of voodoo in the machinery here. Now, Coach, you were at Notre Dame for 10 years. Following the renaming of the Washington Redskins, 11 years rather, following the renaming of the Washington Redskins this week, there are calls to do away with Notre Dame's Fighting Irish nickname, even the leprechaun with his fists up. Some say it reinforces stereotypes. Does it?
What gives those people the right? Give me their credentials, give me their accomplishments. Tell me what gives them the right, who voted them into power? What right do they have to say you can't have any Fighting Irish? First of all, let's learn the history of the Fighting Irish. It occurred in the 20s. The Ku Klux Klan was very, very strong in the 20s. Not only they were against minorities, they were very much against Catholics. They came to South Bend, the Catholic University, Notre Dame at that time was all men. They went down, confronted the Ku Klux Klan in a riot type of fight, and that's where they got the name the Fighting Irish. And that's where it stuck, and that's where it came from, and that's where it should stay. And I'll tell you this also, they better not go tear down my statue at Notre Dame, or they're really going to upset me.
I hope they wouldn't dare, Coach. They'd be the students would prove why they're called the Fighting Irish if they tried to do that.
I got to tell you, they sent me a picture. They put a bandana on my face to make sure I don't get COVID-19 on the statue. They sent me a picture of it, so they're worried about my health, I guess.
Well, when I go down there, I'll take it off because I know you're willing to take the risk and you're high above. The Redskins' decision to drop their name and mascot came following really heavy pressure from sponsors and major retailers. Does the pressure coming from these corporations to change team brands and names concern you?
It does. I think sometimes they have far too much power with their money, et cetera. I think that people have to make those choices for themselves. Sometimes I'll react negatively when somebody does something that I don't necessarily agree with. But to me, they have the right to do what they want to do. But it just right now, everybody pressures everybody else to do a certain thing. We have freedom of choice. The great thing about this country, Raymond, we have the freedom to choose. We can choose to succeed or fail. The free capitalism society does not guarantee you to succeed. Only gives you an opportunity to succeed or fail predicated upon what you did, etc. But now we don't even have freedom of speech anymore. You can't say anything. Oh, you offend somebody. When I growing up, sticks and stones may break my bones. Names will never harm me. Now you can't say anything. You got to be very careful. Everybody's politically correct. That's nonsense. It's time that we start pushing back for the things we believe in, the things we fought for. People stormed Normandy. I took my grandchildren. We went there. You look at those hills straight up, and they had to go up there, and when they went on there, they knew many, many people were going to die. That was part of the casualties you're going to pay in order to keep our way of life, and now we're giving away. And people come from different socialistic countries, and now they want us to become them? Nonsense. That's not who we are. That's not what made this country great. Now, I guess you could mark me down as undecided.
I love that. I love that. And you know, I was there last year at Normandy Beach and in that incredible cemetery, the U.S. cemetery there. And it does take your breath away when you realize these young men who never lived out their days to protect this ideal of freedom and what they would think watching what's become of us here. And I agree with you. If everything that offends us has to go away, there's not going to be a whole lot left except maybe us here talking. It'll be just the two of us, Lou.
But
a few months ago,
the left wants left alone. Yeah, they can say anything they want. They talk about compassion and patience, etc. It's nonsense, you know. And I just think it's time people stood up. I was an officer in the Army, and I tell you, Raymond, I learned more in the military than I ever learned in the college classroom. And this country would be better. If I was president, everybody's going to serve 1 year in the military, men and women. You learn about sacrifice. You learn about what makes things great. You learn about teamwork. Everybody would look on this country a little bit different.
You're probably right. A few months ago, you were interviewed and you spoke about how you and your wife, Beth, were part of a Bible study every morning, particularly during this COVID crisis. Now, you lost your dear wife, a devoted Catholic, a few weeks ago, and we want you to know we were praying for you and your family. Continue to pray for the repose of Beth's soul. How has your faith strengthened you over these last few weeks?
You know, Raymond, that's a great question. Faith to me is everything. You have to have a faith and you have to have a belief. And I just pray all the time to make the right choices. When you have a faith, Raymond, doesn't mean you aren't going to have adversity, difficulty, things are going to go against you. What faith does, it enables you to understand them and to be able to cope with them. The one thing I've learned in being an old man, as I said, my birthday candles cost more than a cake, is you're always going to have problems. You're always going to have difficulties. You're never going to be without them. That's part of life. The whole life is how you meet those challenges, how you handle them. You're always going to have problems. And my faith and prayed on all major decisions, and never left me wrong. And I've often said, you want to make God laugh, you tell him what your plans are. I'm at Minnesota. They want me to take the job, and I'm not sure. And my wife and my children are with me, and everybody's arguing about it. I said, we're all going to go in a different room. We're going to pray for a half hour. We're going to come back out and talk about it. After a half hour of prayer in different rooms, they all come back. They were all in unison. I should go to Minnesota. However, when I prayed, one thought came to my mind. I should put in the Minnesota clause. In other words, if we accepted a bowl bid at Minnesota and Notre Dame offered me the head job, I would be free to go to Notre Dame, because that was always my lifetime goal, to coach there. So God answers prayers, maybe not the way you necessarily want it, but as I say, your faith enables you to handle the challenges, etc. And I think there are two things everybody ought to do every year. One, you ought to go to a wedding where you renew your vows and understand the commitment you made for sickness and health, better or worse, till death do you part. The other thing I do, go to a funeral once a year, and it was a beautiful funeral for Beth at Basilica at Notre Dame. She's buried on the campus there, because you realize you aren't going to be here forever.
Yeah. Well, God bless you, Coach. Thank you for those words, for your witness and your leadership at this time. Lou Holtz's most recent book, 3 Rules for Living a Good Life, a game plan for after graduations, available at bookstores everywhere and online. Coach Holtz, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Love you, Raymond. Love you on Laura's show. And you're on there as much as she is, but I enjoy it.
Shh, don't tell her that. Thank you, Coach. Great to see you.
Thank you, Raymond.
Bye now.